Hey guys, Karenology here. The drama in this one is beyond anything you've seen before. Brace yourself.
They say a man never really knows himself until he's backed into a corner. Well, I guess I found out who I was that morning. I got the second letter from the Homeowner Association. Not the first one. The first was just noise. $50,000, they said. For what? For fixing up a driveway that had been a rutted mess for decades? For making it safe enough for my grandkid to ride his bike without twisting an ankle? But that second letter, that one came with a threat. They were going to shut me down, block the only way in and out of my property with concrete posts. They called it unauthorized terrain usage, said I was endangering the ecological harmony of the neighborhood. Funny how harmony always seemed to mean power in the hands of people like Barrett Wayne. Barrett was the president of the Homeowner Association here in Maple Creek. Wore loafers even when he mowed his lawn, drove a spotless SUV, and smiled the way politicians do when they're stabbing you in the back. Tall, silver-haired, polished. He made a living as a consultant, whatever that means. Retired from something or nothing, but full-time busybody now. And he had a grip on this neighborhood like a vice. I'd only lived here 6 months. Bought the last house on the cul-de-sac, a little rundown place backed into what used to be a fire lane. Long overgrown and forgotten, I saw potential. The house had bones, and the land had a kind of silence I hadn't heard since my wife passed. After 30 years in the fire service, I didn't need much. Just peace, a workshop, and maybe a chance to watch my grandson grow up without everything burning down around us. The driveway wasn't much to look at when I got here. Gravel washed out, roots pushing through the surface. I cleared it by hand. Took me 3 weekends, a busted back, and 2 gallons of sweat. But I did it. For me. For Alex. That kid loved coming over. Said our place smelled like old books and sawdust. That made me laugh. Then came the letters. Then came the threats. Then came Barrett Wayne, standing on my porch in pressed chinos and boat shoes, acting like he owned the air I was breathing. "You're in violation," he said. Eyes scanning the property like he was pricing it for resale. Unauthorized access road, improper grading, potential erosion risks. It's a driveway, Barrett. It's community land, Thomas. You're not authorized to modify it. That community land has been a fire lane since the 50s. My old captain used to drive a rig through there before you were even born. He didn't like that. The corner of his mouth twitched. But he kept smiling. "We'll be in touch." And they were. In touch with fines, demands, threats. One day I came home and found a crew surveying the edge of my yard. Barrett watched from his car like a hawk waiting to swoop. I asked what they were doing. They said nothing, just following orders. At night, I'd sit on the porch with my coffee and my bad knee and wonder how it got to this. I'd fought fires in places where folks had nothing but still found ways to help each other. Now here I was, fighting for the right to back out of my own driveway. My daughter kept telling me to let it go. Said I was retired now, supposed to be resting. But I wasn't built for surrender. My bones might have aged, but not my will. And then the power went out. At first I thought it was a fuse. But no, everything was intact. I checked with the company. They said the account had been flagged for inspection due to possible non-code structures. I laughed. Then I got mad. The next morning, I drove to the town office. That's where I met Joanna Martin, fresh out of law school, volunteering at the municipal records office. Bright eyes, sharp tongue, nervous handshake. She offered to help after I explained what was happening. It sounds like they're pushing a private claim over a public easement, she said, flipping through the old zoning maps. If we can prove the easement was never legally vacated, they're in trouble, she said we. That mattered more than I realized at the time. She found a document from 1959, typed on onion skin paper, nearly faded to dust. It granted perpetual right of way to emergency services through the stretch behind my property. The same stretch I had turned into a driveway. There it is, she whispered, tapping the page. And it was never officially closed. Barrett had no legal ground. But legal wasn't his weapon. Pressure was. 2 nights later, a man knocked on my door. Said he was from the electrical company. Said they had orders to cut the line unless I removed all unapproved modifications. I told him to come back with a warrant. He didn't, but it wasn't over. That was just the beginning, and by God, I wasn't going to be the man who let people like Barrett Wayne decide who belonged and who didn't. Not in this lifetime, not ever again. Barrett Wayne didn't take long to escalate things. 2 days after the failed power stunt, I found a citation notice duct taped to my front gate. Yes, duct taped. Not mailed, not delivered by an officer, just slapped on there like a warning to a stray dog. The letter claimed that my workshop in the back, a modest structure I'd built with permits back in January, was now under review for zoning non-compliance. Funny thing was, I hadn't even mentioned the workshop in my conversations with the association. They were digging, looking for anything they could use. I called Joanna. She didn't sound surprised. That's classic administrative harassment, she said. They're throwing darts hoping one sticks. She offered to help draft a response. I told her I appreciated it. But the truth was, I felt the storm coming. You can feel it in your bones, same as when I used to ride toward burning houses. The air gets heavier, quieter, and then it hits. I decided to visit an old friend, Dan Marcus, a structural engineer and my former firehouse buddy. He still owed me a beer from '92 and had a knack for navigating building code mazes. We spent the afternoon in his cluttered garage, going through old land plat maps, zoning boundaries, and property assessments. He grunted when he saw the survey marks on the aerial photos. They're trying to move the boundary line, he said. See that here? They're nudging it east. Subtle. But they're setting up for a land grab. He explained that if they could redefine my back entrance as encroaching on community property, they could file for eminent domain through the association's umbrella structure. I wasn't just dealing with HOA politics. I was standing in the way of something bigger. Later that week, I drove by the wooded easement where my driveway cut through and noticed a new sign posted. Future site of Maple Creek Community Tennis Complex. My stomach twisted. That's what this was about. Not erosion, not grading, not even harmony. It was about money. And Barrett's son, Nick, just happened to own a construction company. It didn't take a detective to draw the lines. I brought this to Joanna. She nearly spilled her coffee when I showed her the sign. "This changes everything," she said. "If you're right and this is a private project masked as a community improvement, they're in violation of half a dozen municipal codes." She started digging deeper. Public records, conflict of interest reports, campaign contributions, whatever she could get her hands on. Meanwhile, I filed a temporary injunction to halt construction. It was denied, of course. The judge was an old golf buddy of Barrett's. Small towns don't hide their loyalties well. Then came the night visit, not from Barrett, from Peter Drake. Peter had been my neighbor for all of 6 months. Retired military, kept to himself, polite but distant. He'd brought over a pie once when I moved in, said his wife insisted. We'd waved, shared the occasional word about lawnmowers or weather. But now he stood on my porch, under the yellow light, holding a manila envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at my kitchen table like a man dragging a confession through barbed wire. "I was asked to file a complaint," he said. "Said it would help the neighborhood. Said it was just procedural." I didn't say anything. He opened the envelope. Inside were internal emails, messages between Barrett, Nick, and a couple of council members. They weren't just planning a tennis complex. They were planning a private facility, funded through HOA fees, with exclusive memberships. "They told me to say your workshop was an eyesore," Peter said. "They promised a seat on the board." "And what changed?" I asked. "My wife. She found the email chain and threatened to leave me if I went through with it. Said she didn't marry a coward." Peter left the envelope with me and walked out without another word. I spent the next morning in Joanna's office. She read the emails twice, mouth tightening with each page. "This is enough for an ethics complaint," she said. "Maybe even criminal fraud." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. I made copies of everything and sent one set to a local journalist who'd covered community corruption stories before. Her name was Rachel Crow. Smart, sharp, and just bitter enough to go for blood. The next morning, her article ran with the headline, "Driveway Dispute Uncovers HOA Corruption in Maple Creek." That's when things exploded. I got calls. First from neighbors, some supportive, some furious. Then from lawyers. Then from someone claiming to be an anonymous whistleblower. Barrett went silent. Nick disappeared from public meetings. The tennis complex sign was taken down overnight. But I knew this was just the start. People like Barrett don't vanish. They dig deeper. They lash out. That night I got a warning call from Dan. "You need to move fast," he said. "They're going to try and kill the easement altogether. If they get the council to reclassify the land, your driveway's gone." I asked what my options were. He paused. "You buy the land. Buy the edge of it, where it connects to the old route. If it's yours, they can't touch it." I didn't have that kind of money. But I had time, and one less favor to call in, and I knew just who to call. The man I called was named Curtis Lang. I hadn't spoken to him in over 15 years, but he picked up on the second ring like he'd been expecting it. "Tom," he said. "Hell, I thought you were dead." Curtis was a land appraiser turned investor. He'd made his fortune snapping up overlooked parcels of land near developing areas and flipping them after rezoning. We'd met when he did a training on firehouse zoning conflicts back in the day. He owed me a favor. I once pulled his brother out of a collapsed office building during a fire downtown. That kind of debt doesn't go away. I explained my situation. told him I needed a sliver of land right at the start of the easement, just enough to create a legal choke point. "You don't need much," he said. 20 feet wide, 100 feet long, that'll make it yours. One way out. Clever. He made a few calls. By some miracle, or maybe Curtis's silver tongue, the lot was available. Belonged to the city, buried under a pile of defunct zoning claims and uncollected property taxes. The best part? It was cheap. Dirt cheap. I dipped into the last of my retirement savings, the fund I'd been holding back for Alex's college. My daughter cried when I told her, but she understood. "You're fighting for more than just a driveway," she said. "You're fighting for dignity." Curtis handled the paperwork. Joanna made sure every I was dotted, every T crossed. By Friday afternoon, I held the deed in my hand. A narrow piece of forgotten earth now stood between the Homeowner Association and their land grab. The next day, I rented a post-hole digger and set up a temporary gate. I didn't block anyone. I just posted a new sign. "Private property, one-way exit only. Smile, you're on camera." The neighborhood lost its mind. Suddenly, everyone remembered that the only convenient exit from Maple Creek was through that route. Without it, drivers had to loop around a winding road that added 10 minutes to every trip. Delivery trucks, carpools, emergency vehicles, all affected. And now they had to pass under my little archway, where my camera captured every license plate. I didn't gloat. I just sat on my porch, drank my coffee, and waited. Barrett tried to retaliate. He sent another citation, this time for creating a traffic hazard. Then he filed a formal complaint to the city council demanding a revocation of my purchase. Joanna intercepted the motion and filed a counterclaim supported by Curtis's appraisal and the original 1959 easement documents. Peter Drake, now thoroughly on my side, went door to door explaining the full scope of the corruption. He brought copies of the emails, showed neighbors how their dues had been used for private gain. A few doors slammed in his face, but others listened. Then came the town meeting. Maple Creek's community hall hadn't been that packed since the 4th of July potluck. People stood in the back, murmuring and shifting in their boots. I wore my old service jacket, not for show, but to remind folks who I was, what I'd given, what I'd fought for. Barrett took the podium first, all confidence and cologne. He spun a web about community growth, shared amenities, and how my actions were selfish, even dangerous. Then Joanna stood up. She had the documents, the timeline, the receipts. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Truth has its own resonance. When it was my turn, I didn't speak from notes. I spoke from the gut. I've served in burning buildings where strangers held hands to survive. I've seen people give their last breath to protect others. And I've seen folks like Barrett use the word community like a shield while they stab it in the back. This isn't about a driveway. It's about who gets to say what's right. And I say, no more. The room went quiet, then someone clapped, then another. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was something better. It was real. The council voted to uphold my purchase and open a formal investigation into the Homeowner Association's leadership. Barrett was suspended pending inquiry. Nick Wayne, his son, disappeared from the board entirely. The tennis complex project was frozen, but the victory was hollow for now. I knew men like Barrett didn't fold. They regrouped. They struck from the shadows, and I wasn't about to be caught in the dark again. The next morning, I installed floodlights and reinforced the gate. I added motion sensors and connected the feed directly to Joanna's secure server. Then I went to see Rachel Crow. Her office was a mess of legal pads, coffee cups, and half-eaten sandwiches. She looked at me like I was her next Pulitzer. "Yet they'll come after you," she said. "Let them try," I said. "Just make sure the world knows when they do." She smiled. "Oh, they will." The article she published that weekend included quotes, documents, and even stills from the camera feed. Local news picked it up, then regional, then national, and with every headline, Barrett's grip loosened. But that's when he made his most desperate move yet. He filed a lawsuit, claiming I'd tampered with community infrastructure and endangered public safety. And the judge assigned? The same old friend from the country club. Game on. When you've been a firefighter as long as I was, you learn to read heat, where it builds, where it hides, and where it's about to blow. That courtroom was about to combust the moment Judge Wendell Hargrove walked in. I knew Wendell. Everyone did. He was one of those backslapping country club types who smiled with all his teeth and none of his heart. He played poker with Barrett Wayne twice a month, and now he was going to decide whether I was a criminal. The lawsuit claimed that by purchasing and restricting the easement, I had endangered public safety, created an illegal obstruction, and violated at least 3 community ordinances. Barrett had his lawyers dressed like undertakers and just as cheerful. They painted me as a rogue homeowner, a dangerous vigilante who thought himself above the law. Joanna stood next to me at the defense table, calm and unreadable. She was brilliant in that way, all fire behind the eyes, but never a wasted word. We had our documents, the original easement, the deed to the strip of land, the timeline, the emails, but more than that, we had the truth. Still, truth doesn't always win in a room where the chairs are already leaning one way. The trial was supposed to last 3 days. It lasted 2 weeks. Barrett's side delayed every motion, challenged every exhibit, objected to every statement. Joanna countered each with calm precision, but I could feel the grind. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to wear us down, and maybe they were getting close. I'd lost weight, sleep. My daughter started calling twice a day, worried I'd collapse. Even Peter Drake looked worn from going door to door, drumming up support. He'd become my unexpected ally. His guilt had turned into a kind of mission. I respected that. On the 12th day, a surprise witness took the stand. A former HOA board member named Ellen Grady. She looked nervous, fidgety, eyes darting like a trapped animal. But when she spoke, the room held its breath. "I was asked to falsify the voting records," she said. "They never had the numbers to approve the tennis complex. Barrett told us to manufacture the quorum. That broke something open. The judge tried to suppress the testimony, but Rachel Crow was in the room. Her pen moved like lightning, and by evening, the headline was everywhere. HOA board member alleges fraud in court. The next day, Joanna rested our case. She looked at the jury, then at me, then said quietly, "We've said enough." The closing arguments came and went. I barely heard Barrett's lawyer. I was staring at the jurors, trying to read their eyes. Some looked tired. Some looked angry. One older woman, maybe mid-70s, looked right at me, gave the slightest nod. When the verdict came, I didn't breathe. The court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Thomas Beckett. Applause broke out. Someone whooped. Joanna actually smiled. A small, hard-won thing. I stood there like a man who just stepped out of a burning building, dazed but standing. Barrett stormed out. No handshake, no eye contact. It should have been over. But that night, I came home to find my gate smashed open. The motion cameras were offline. My garage had been broken into. Papers scattered. Tools missing. The place torn up like a bear had gone through it. I called the sheriff. He said it was likely vandalism, maybe kids. But the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe that either. Then I found the note, folded, placed neatly on my workshop bench. You should have stayed quiet. I gave the note to Rachel. She ran a story about the break-in. But she also told me something else. They're scared. You didn't just win a case. You exposed the system. Peter came over that weekend with a 6-pack and a toolbox. We're rebuilding this place better, he said. No more warnings. We reinforced the gate, rewired the cameras. Even installed a second backup server in Dan Marcus's garage. If they wanted a war, I was done playing defense. Meanwhile, the investigation into the Homeowner Association picked up steam. Ellen Grady gave a full deposition. 2 more board members stepped down. Financial audits began to uncover shady payments. Contracts awarded to shell companies. Unrecorded fee increases. Backdoor deals. Joanna filed a formal petition to dissolve the association entirely. A radical move, she said, but justified. Especially after more neighbors came forward. People I didn't even know, saying they'd been fined for imaginary violations or bullied into silence. The community was waking up. The city council announced a public hearing to determine the future of the HOA. It would be open to all residents. 1 vote per household, no proxies, no tricks. It was our shot to end it all. But I knew Barrett wouldn't let it go without pulling one last card. And sure enough, 3 days before the hearing, a new flyer appeared on every door. Without the HOA, your home values will plummet. Criminals will move in. Taxes will rise. Don't let a disgruntled ex-fireman destroy our community. They'd printed my face in black and white. Beneath the headline, "The man who wants to burn it all down." I took one look, then pinned it to my front door. Let them come. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I walked the perimeter of my property 3 times, flashlight in hand, checking locks, cameras, gates. The wind carried the scent of pine and the faint hum of distant traffic, but something else hung in the air. Anticipation, like the static before a lightning strike. At dawn, Peter showed up with coffee and a stack of printed flyers. Simple facts, he said. No drama. Just the truth. I took one and read. Breakdown of HOA expenditures. Quote from Ellen Grady's testimony. Copies of Barrett's email threads. No embellishments. Just enough to light a fire where it counted. By noon, the town hall parking lot was overflowing. Folks who hadn't attended a public meeting in decades came with folding chairs, umbrellas, thermoses of sweet tea. Joanna stood near the entrance, organizing volunteers. Rachel hovered by the press table, voice recorder in hand, eyes alert like a hawk on a wire. Barrett arrived late, flanked by 2 lawyers and his son Nick, who hadn't shown his face in weeks. They wore matching suits and matching smug expressions. Barrett nodded at the crowd like he was the mayor. Some nodded back. Others turned away. The hearing began with formality. The city clerk reading the purpose, the proposed motion to formally dissolve the Maple Creek Homeowner Association. 1 vote per household. The stakes were clear. Keep things the way they were, or burn the whole rotten structure down. Then came the testimonials. Barrett spoke first. He warned of chaos, declining property values, insurance hikes, crime waves. He blamed me by name, called me reckless, said I injected hostility into a previously peaceful neighborhood. Then Joanna stood. She didn't refute every point. She didn't need to. She read the numbers, cited the statutes, told them where their money went. Then she gestured to me. I didn't plan on speaking. But the room turned toward me like it expected it. So I stood. I didn't move here to fight, I said. I moved here to breathe, to rest, to build birdhouses and teach my grandson how to sand a piece of cedar. But I wasn't raised to turn away from wrong. And what's been happening here is wrong. I paused, looked around the room, saw faces weathered by life, by mortgages, by long winters and lost jobs. I've seen what community really means. When your roof caves in, or your wife gets sick, or your dog goes missing, you don't call the HOA. You call your neighbor. You show up. That's what matters. Not meetings behind closed doors. Not rules that change when they're convenient. A hush settled over the hall. Even Barrett looked rattled. Then came the vote. 1 by 1, households were called. A volunteer read each name aloud. Residents raised colored cards. Green for yes, red for no. It took an hour. Felt like a lifetime. When the final tally was read, I heard someone gasp. 136 to 24. The motion passed. The Homeowner Association was dissolved. People clapped. Then cheered. Some cried. A few walked out in silence. Barrett and Nick were gone before the gavel even dropped. Joanna hugged me. Peter patted my back like I'd just climbed Everest. Rachel winked. "How's it feel?" she asked. "Like I just put out a fire that's been burning for years," I said. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. The city absorbed some basic maintenance duties. Neighbors formed a volunteer committee to handle local upkeep. We fixed what we could, together. Folks started talking again, really talking. Barrett moved out. No one threw a party, but no one shed tears either. Nick's company lost its contract with the county. Rumor had it he left the state. Ellen Grady took over a new transparency council, making sure things stayed clean. As for me, I rebuilt my workshop, stronger this time, with Peter's help and Alex's tiny hands handing us nails. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Alex sat beside me on the porch, swinging his legs. "Grandpa," he said, "did you win?" I looked out across the land, at the little road I'd fought so hard to protect, at the neighbors chatting by the mailbox, at the sound of a distant lawnmower humming like summer. "I think we all did," I said. He nodded, then reached for another nail, and we kept building.